I'm going to go ahead and get this rolling here. Tim McGee, we're looking at you, buddy. He's going to talk through it all. Thank you guys for coming out for our police chiefs panel here. We're going to go ahead and start it off with our invocation here, so if you could please bow your heads. Father, we thank you and ask you to bless the food before us, the friends and family that surround us, and the opportunities that come before us. In your name we pray. Amen. If you could please rise for the pledge of the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Take a seat. All right. Now, if we could also bring up Dana Russell here from the IREM Chapter 56 president here.
Good afternoon to you folks. It's an honor and a pleasure of mine to be here. Thank you, Mike, for this. To our guests here today, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedules and just allowing us to hear from you all. IREM represents property managers in the commercial industry. And so I was just looking over at who you all represent, and I think I have properties in each one of your areas. And so I am able to rest at night because of you and your teams. And so please, I extend my thank you to all that you are doing to protect our properties and our investments. IREM Piedmont chapter, we just got out of a board meeting of our planning session for 2026. And if you don't know about IREM, I would love to sit down and speak to you about IREM and what we have to offer. But we've got some great things planning for 2026, and it's not just a social event. It's education. It is being meaningful in our communities and giving back to our communities and making a difference. And so we would love for you to be a part of that. We have some great sponsors, some great industry partners that have shown on the screens above us. But again, we are so looking forward to 2026 and would love to have you be a part of that. So with that, I welcome you and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dana. Yes. All right. Just a couple of upcoming events that we have. December 2nd is the GRRA Awards Luncheon at 11:30. December 9th is the GRRA-RCA, IREM, and CCIM. That is the Joint Holiday Social, which is right here in this building, actually in this room specifically, from 4 to 7. Then December 11th is the GRRA Holiday at Our House party, also right here. So then go ahead and get this rolling. If I could bring up our moderator for this event. We have Ms. Tammy Dixon here from NAI Piedmont Triad. So let's hear it for Tammy Dixon.
Thank you, Mike. So I am honored to be here today and moderating our panel of chiefs across the Triad. We have with us today Assistant Chief Manny Gomez with Winston-Salem. Manny Gomez joined the Winston-Salem Police Department in January of 1999. He began his career with the Winston-Salem Police Department as a police cadet in the Support Services Bureau. He has served with the Investigative Services Bureau assigned to the Special Investigations Division and Criminal Investigations Division, serving in the Vice and Narcotics and Robbery sections. With us also today, we have Chief John Thompson of Greensboro. Chief John Thompson began his law enforcement career in 1998 with the Asheboro Police Department before joining the Greensboro Police Department in 2003. During his more than 2 decades of service in Greensboro, he rose through the ranks as sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and assistant chief before being appointed chief of police in December of 2022. We also have with us Assistant Chief Peter Abernathy of High Point. Assistant Chief Peter Abernathy serves in the Support Services Division of the High Point Police Department. He has a long history with the department, rising through the ranks and now overseeing key administrative and community-facing functions. In his role, he is known for his commitment to strengthening community relationships and ensuring that departmental services are responsive, efficient, and aligned with High Point's public safety goals. And last but certainly not least, we have Chief Alan Balag of Burlington. And also your number one fan over here. He is a 19-year veteran of law enforcement and became the chief in June of 2023. He is a Burlington native, and he has previously served in supervisory roles within Burlington Police Department, including patrol, criminal investigations, and professional standards divisions at the department, and was the assistant chief over the operations bureau. So with that, I would like to invite you to the front to join us at the table. So we were very excited to have you all here. This was a very well-attended event last year, and we learned a lot. We heard a lot about drones, we heard a lot about public safety, and we have a group of people here who are looking forward to hearing from each of you today. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. And we're going to start here at the very end with Chief Balag and start with the question, what is the biggest issue that you're facing in your respective departments today?
Sound check. All right, great. I think for me it's a big picture issue, and it's about city revenue in an inflationary market. When you think about how do you accomplish police work, how do you get the officers to the emergencies, how do you make sure they have the equipment that they need, how do you make sure that they've got the software that's necessary to solve crime, it all comes down to the dollar. I think that this room in particular understands the inflationary market that we've been in over the last few years. That's dramatically impacted salaries, equipment purchases, software expenses. You know, software generally is like a 13% increase every year. So think about 13% compounded. We wish we could make that on our investment returns consistently. That's really where the rubber is currently meeting the road, and I think you see that across the region in addition to local municipalities. We're seeing that show up in the school systems. We're seeing that show up at the county commissioner level. We're seeing that show up in multiple parts of the state. So I think for me, that's the place where, you know, in the current space, there's a lot of issue around that specifically.
Good morning, everyone. So for us in Winston-Salem, internally, I'll speak internally and externally. Internally, we're still struggling with recruitment of police officers, some of what Chief spoke about, right? Salaries and benefits and those type of things are definitely impacted when we try to recruit new police officers. When we talk about a police officer, they're not just plug and play. We're talking about them going to a police academy, about 6 to 8 months, and then field training, so another 2 to 3 months before they're operational by themselves. So you're looking at well over a year or close to a year before we have an operational police officer all by themselves, right? And that's very minimal experience at that end. So we're struggling with recruitment. We've made big gains, but we're still trying to chip away at that. And then externally, juvenile behavior, criminal behavior, and then the unhoused population are two of the biggest things that we're facing in Winston-Salem. It affects everything from just quality of life, but also our businesses. We talk about businesses. Businesses make decisions on whether or not they come to our communities based on our crimes, and also whether or not it looks like a livable place. So when we're talking about these type of crimes, these are quality of life crimes, and we need to address them quite regularly.
Thank you. Chief Thompson.
Testing. Okay. I think we in Greensboro have kind of similar issues that Burlington and and Winston face, and a little bit different. I think probably for us, one of the most significant challenges we're facing going forward is keeping up with growth. So if anybody, and I'm sure everybody in the room knows about all of the significant growth the triad's seeing. So, and that does touch all of us up here. We're literally a stone's throw away when you talk about Greensboro, Winston, High Point, Burlington. And so historically, the police department is not very good at predicting and being ready for growth. We unfortunately have been reactive most of the time. So we wait until we figure out we've got way too much work for our officers to handle, and then we have to figure out how we go to city leadership and elected officials and say, hey, we're 100 officers short, we need 100 officers. And it feeds into what Manny was saying as it relates to staffing. That's not a quick fix. If we're 100 short, you're probably 2 or 3 years away from filling those 100 officers, if you're lucky. So I do not typically compliment the fire department. It's not my nature. I can't do it, but they actually do a phenomenal job at planning for future growth and development. You could sit down with the fire chief in the command staff, and he could say, once we hit this level of population, once we've annexed this much property, once this much roadways built, we need a fire station, and it needs to be right here, and this is how that needs to be staffed. We've just not done that very well in the police department. So growth, so that we can be ready and prepared as all of this wonderful economic development, folks are moving into Greensboro, Triad area, so that we can continue to keep the community safe and not get behind.
Good afternoon. I wish I had like a whole, separate issues that I could point out for High Point that are vastly different than our counterparts, but really what I'll offer is largely the same. For us, our staffing is our biggest challenge right now. We are able to recruit, and we've continued to do a good job with that, and that's continued to pick up, and we're getting good candidates, and we're able to get those candidates through training. But again, it's a year turnaround from the time they're hired until they're actually on the street and answering calls. But along with that, because we're 30 people short on the street, it's also evaluating and trying to balance new technology, to make the most of the manpower that we do have. So things that might be force multipliers for us.
So I'm going to come back to Assistant Chief Gomez. You mentioned briefly juvenile criminal behavior in Winston-Salem. This will be a question addressing that specifically, but then also for the panel. What would be the biggest contribution for your community, or that your community could make to assist with public safety? And can you talk a little more about what you're seeing in terms of juvenile crime?
Yeah, absolutely. So Chief Penn has been very public and very vocal about the juvenile crime that we've seen. Essentially, we've been seeing takeover behavior, if you will, where we will have a rash of 60, 70 juveniles that just congregate in certain areas, like a flash mob type situation. Initially, it starts off pretty peaceful, just teenagers hanging around, but inevitably it gets into fights, frays, assaults, and eventually sometimes they turn into shootings, right? So we're trying to stop some of that. We're seeing it at our local parks. We're seeing it at our downtown area, which is something that we're trying to not encourage, especially in our downtown area, is our business district, if you will. So all our bars, restaurants, and that type of recreation for our citizens is what we're trying to promote, right? Our ballpark is downtown as well. So when we see these type of things, unfortunately, juvenile law is very specific, and there's only so much teeth that we as law enforcement can use to address these type of behaviors. So the chief was very vocal when he came out and said that we were going to start charging parents and guardians, those that are ultimately responsible for the kids that are involved in this type of behavior. It was very well received by the community at large, and we're continuing to do that. So as far as contributions by municipal government and or by the general public in the area is partnering with nonprofits and giving these essentially juveniles something else to do other than congregate in these areas. That's easier said than done, right? Because these folks need role models. They need things that are interesting to them and not just what we think is interesting to them. We've had concerts. We've tried a bunch of different approaches in Winston-Salem, and they seem to work to a certain extent. But at the end of the day, we need community involvement to be able to basically volunteer with these nonprofits to help us take on this very big burden.
Thank you.
I think for me, the biggest piece is being a reliable contributor to the community. So, like Manny said, it comes down to parenting as it relates to juveniles, or, it may not be a parent, it could be a guardian, but the concept's the same. People have to be responsible for their youth. We've certainly, at these tables, seen outrageous things done by 14, 15, and 16-year-olds to each other, to other juveniles, to adults. There really is no limit to what a 15 or 16-year-old with a machine gun will do. And we know that that's part of why we've seen juvenile crime increase and be a real problem in the state. It even got to the point where the legislature rolled back a portion of the raise the age law to make it so that juveniles could be charged as felons again and go through the adult court system again because the prior process was not working particularly well. Outside the juvenile space, we really need people to be reliable witnesses, frankly. We need people to step up and do the right thing and tell the truth when they see something happening or when they know somebody has done something really bad. For us, unfortunately, the folks at these tables have seen children killed in their community by acts of gun violence and other felonious assaults. And what we find is that the people who see what happened will not tell the truth about it. And that's outrageous. I don't think that's the type of thing that anyone should be able to live with, and that but somehow they manage to navigate through their personal decision-making to get to the point of silence around issues like that. It doesn't have to be so extreme as the death of a child, but it certainly should be other things also, and being upfront with the police and being honest and coming forward and talking about what has happened in their community. Unfortunately, I know that people are afraid, and that's the nature of the lives that they have experienced, but that doesn't make it, their communities don't get safer when they don't cooperate with the police. And that's the reality of how do you make a neighborhood more safe? Everybody helps make it safe together. The people who don't want to make it safe, who want to continue to offend and do bad things to other people, those are the ones that we pull out and we send them to prison because they're continuing to violate the rights of others, commit acts of violence.
Thank you, Chief Balig. And we'll start here at the end and hear from Assistant Chief Peter Abernathy.
All right. I think in High Point, what our community contributions is again, be a good witness. So obviously don't get involved when you see things directly, but be a good witness. And when you do see something, pay attention so that when the police do get there, that it can be reported accurately. Because too often we have people that, eyewitnesses inherently, they see what their minds want them to see, and so it's not always accurate. So the more people that we have that can offer a perspective, the better. I would say in addition to that, juvenile crime affects communities all across the state, and that has been a significant problem in High Point as well. And I think one thing that we see is so often that, especially this time of year when it's getting colder in the mornings, we all like to get in a warm car, myself included. And if you leave your car running at a convenience store or in a very public place, and sometimes even at your own home, juveniles are taking that as a crime of opportunity. The car is unlocked or it's already running, and they take the car, and then unfortunately we find all too often that somebody's left their personal gun in that car. Well, so now this group of 5 or 6 juveniles has a stolen car and a gun, and they're using those stolen cars to go out and commit other crimes. So that the vehicle is literally a vehicle to commit another crime, and the gun that lawful owner has that they left in the car and secured now becomes involved in a violent act. So I would encourage everybody to, if when you own a weapon, keep it secured. Don't leave it in your car overnight. Don't leave it somewhere that somebody, if they were to break into your car, break into your house, could get a hold of that gun, because I would say 90% of the time the people that are doing that are juveniles, and they're taking those and committing crimes with them. And on the technology side, we use a real-time crime center, and Fusus is the product that we use there, and we have the ability, and I'm sure our counterparts do too. So many people in here, I bet almost everybody has a Ring camera or some version of that at home, and you can register those cameras through our Fusus, through the Real-Time Crime Center in High Point, so that if we have a crime that occurs on your street, we can't see your camera, but it at least will let us know that, hey, the residents, 3 or 4 houses down or in either direction all have a camera that's registered, and then we can reach out to you directly through a text and ask you to review your footage for us, and then you can obviously share that if you like. But it's nothing that we have immediate access to, but it does allow us to at least see on a map where these external cameras are and where they're available. So that's been very helpful.
Thank you. Chief Thompson.
Yeah, I was kind of looking around the room here, and I see I'm probably close in age with most of the folks in here. There might be a few younger folks, but I want to go back to a comment that was made. It's really challenging because a lot of problems in society get pushed towards law enforcement. We make kind of a I don't want to say a joke of it, but if you call 911 when you have an issue, we say if it's somebody that's not bleeding or medical need, they're not going to send, they'll send an ambulance out for that. If it's something that's on fire, then here comes the fire department. And everything else, they're sending a police officer to. And oftentimes what we've seen, I know in my career, we've gone on calls where a child refuses to go to school and a parent doesn't know how to deal with it, and they're calling police. A child comes home late. A child is arguing in the neighborhood over something, and police are called for it. And so I think for me, it stems back to a lot of societal issues. Growing up, I'm one of 9 kids in my family, and my mom was a stay-at-home parent. My dad went to work, but it wasn't just the responsibility of my parents. I had grandparents, I had neighbors, and it was really a community effort in taking care of kids, especially if they started to kind of get involved in activity they shouldn't be involved in. So we have to figure out how we get better as a community and a society in helping kids that aren't in those situations. Not everybody has the benefit of a 2-parent family like I did growing up, with support, with aunts, uncles, grandparents, that kind of a thing. And so we just need to figure out how we can intervene in those kids that maybe don't have those opportunities and help them to make better decisions. We had last year it was just a tragedy where an officer went to stop a car. He thought it was a drunk driver. It was stopped at an intersection. It made, I think it was on Market or Friendly, but it made a left turn, and it was going the wrong way. It was about 2:30 in the morning. Down the street, officer thinks it's a drunk driver, goes to stop it. The car takes off. gets up to about 100 miles an hour and goes head on into another police officer's car. Police officer never even saw it coming. And it was a 13, 14, and 15-year-old in the car. All three of them killed from that crash. And when I had the opportunity to go sit down with the parents of those children, you could see that they were struggling. And they said, we saw them making bad decisions, skipping school, going out at night, and I didn't know how to handle it. And I think if there was somebody there that could have helped those parents in those situations, that could have been a different outcome, a different situation. Oftentimes, when we're involved in law enforcement, it's I hate to say it's almost too late at that point. If we're intervening in stolen cars and assaults and guns, it's extremely difficult to change the trajectory of that child at that point in their life. So, not really, I don't necessarily, I guess there's no grand solution to tell you other than we've just got to figure out as a community, as a society, how I think we can be better supporting those kids that are on that wrong path and be willing to kind of step out of our comfort zone and figure out how we do that.
Thank you. Let's go back to Chief Balick. Last year, the panel educated us on the role that drones are playing in your response times. Has AI had any impact on your role, and why?
Yes, the same way it's rapidly expanding across the rest of society and business, it's certainly in policing also. I think the first and most important thing to say about artificial intelligence is it's only as good a tool as the people who are using it. So you have to have really good officers and professional staff to take advantage of it. And then the other thing past that is that data security and the privacy of the information in law enforcement is tip-top number one. There's a lot of laws, there's a lot of rules that are in place at the state and federal level related to the protection of that information. So, we can't take, some information from somebody and just drop it into ChatGPT. It becomes public at that point. ChatGPT knows it. It can be found on somebody else's search, all those sorts of things. So we really start there. We've applied it through some enterprise only. So we have a server. It's connected to our data. It can only use the information that we give it. So it doesn't share this information out to the rest of the system. That's the normal uses. The other things for us are, if you think about body-worn camera footage, okay, for just a second, and every police officer has it. So, we have about 150. These guys have multiples of that, considerably more. Hundreds of thousands of hours of footage every year. We currently have a software program. It's through a grant, so at this point it's temporary, that watches all of that video footage, listens to all the audio, and then will notify you if it thinks there's a problem with something somebody has done. It's the ability to really do quality control checks across every police officer all the time that they're doing their job. That program's called Trulio. The research so far does show that it can change behavior of officers if there's a problem. There's a lot of advantage in that as opposed to assigning 3 people to look at video all the time and then picking and choosing about what gets seen or doesn't get seen as opposed to all of it. So you really end up with figuring out whether you have a professional organization very quickly or not. And then these other guys will talk about real-time crime center applications and some of their stuff, I'm sure.
Thank you.
So for us in Winston-Salem, we have a pretty robust DFR and tactical drone program. Along with a real-time crime center. We are internationally recognized. We get visitors from the London Police Service, the Australian Police Service, Canadian, 9 different delegations from Mexico. Believe it or not, it's housed right down the highway from you guys. And then nationally, we get visitors from all over the nation to see how we're incorporating technology. To specifically address the AI thing, there's an ethical constraint constraint that we have to ensure that we as law enforcement are following, and that is, as Chief mentioned, the AI is only as good as a human element. We never remove the human element when we're talking about AI. I think if you look at any conversation dealing with AI, they're always talking about the human element, the human element, the human element. We are responsible for anything that we use that's been used through the AI. We participated in a podcast with the ACLU and the North Carolina School of Government, which are the authorities when it comes to police law here in North Carolina, and also the ACLU and some of their concerns. They like what we're doing and how we're doing it with a few constraints. What Chief mentioned is one of their concerns, right? That with AI you have this whole large bank of data and you can go through it and come through it relatively quickly. That's what helps us out, right? That's what helps us with this manpower shortage. It's a force multiplier. As long as we're applying and using the AI ethically and within policies and boundaries, then I have not seen a concern or an issue, and that's what we preach to all these agencies that come to the Police Department of Winston-Salem.
Thank you. And I'm going to turn this back to Chief Thompson with the same question, but a more specific focus in Greensboro with regards to domestic violence. So what are you seeing as far as how drones are playing into response times and AI with regards to domestic violence?
So we were actually having a discussion at the table while we were eating lunch, and we're kind of at a point now where I think both Burlington and Winston-Salem have been at. So we have deployed drones. We have a drone team that gets activated for special events or incidents that they would come out on a missing person, endangered person, silver alert, tactical operations. And we're kind of now at that point where we have to determine, I guess, what our drone program will look like going forward, and looking at what they call DFR, which is a drone as a first responder. And that's where your drones are, you have a set of drones that are positioned geographically throughout the city, and they can automatically be dispatched and go to the area of a crime, and it doesn't have to be manually flown to get there. And there's permissions where you can fly out of sight, where right now what we operate is you have to have the operator that has that drone in sight. And so the DFR really allows for an expansion of services, dispatch to calls. Talking about in Burlington being utilized for their fire department on fires and things like that. So we're kind of at a point now where we're trying to figure out which path we're going to take as it relates to our drone program. And I will touch on the domestic violence because I don't know that those two things really marry up, because unfortunately domestic violence as we see it happens behind closed doors. And I will say, even though this year, a couple weeks, we're going to have our year-end report, and I'll share with the group here, it's not a secret, we're seeing some significant drops in crime in the city. So we're about 23% down in violent crime across Greensboro. We're about 11 or 12% down in property crime. And those are significant numbers for our community. But unfortunately, what we have seen is an increase in domestic violence in our community. So right now we have 33 homicides in the city of Greensboro. 9 of them are directly connected to domestic violence. And that means they have that domestic relationship. We have 4 or 5 more that are directly connected with domestic violence, but they don't have that relationship. So what it is girlfriend with new boyfriend shows up, new boyfriend and old boyfriend get in a fight, one shoots and kills the other one. That isn't classified as a domestic violence homicide because old boyfriend and new boyfriend aren't in that relationship. But we have had 4 or 5 incidents where that has happened, so domestic is kind of a precursor to that violence. And so we have a phenomenal agency in the Family Justice Center here in Greensboro that helps with that, but we've just seen that spike in domestic violence in our community, and it's something we need to try to figure out how we can be better, because it's a very challenging crime to police. We had an incident earlier this year that it was a murder-suicide, and we had never been to the house on a domestic violence call one time. They had never had any law enforcement interactions between either of them. And when we started interviewing family members, neighbors, friends, every single person we talked to said, yeah, we knew there was domestic violence going on in that house. We knew that there was assault. We knew there was issues. And we didn't know. We were never called. And so how as a police department can we address that? That's the challenge. So it's for us, domestic violence is a significant issue in Greensboro. We're making some changes in our response, trying to get assistance on the front end. So every time we have an interaction, Family Justice Center, 99% of the time, if they visit the Family Justice Center, they will not be a victim of homicide. So if we can get them through those doors, get them the help, get them assistance, that's one of our more successful tools. But it's something we have to figure out for sure.
Thank you.
All right, I think as far as our drone and technology and AI, I think where High Point is currently is very closely aligned with Greensboro. We've had, I think we got our first drone probably 5 years ago, and I'll refer to it as Chief Thompson did, as a tactical drone. So these are drones that an individual operator flies. There has to be somebody else with them that can watch the drone. These are the rules from the FAA and others. And so we've increased the fleet of those and the use of those pretty significantly now to where we have about 8 of those that we use pretty consistently. And some of those are specifically to be flown indoors. And so, in a, whether it's a tactical situation where we need to have some sort of overwatch and see what's going on outside, or whether we need to send one of the interior drones in that can be flown inside to go in and clear the house, at least to some degree, to make sure there aren't perpetrators lying in wait inside. We can do both of those things. When specifically about AI and its role, I think for us, that's something that we're constantly evaluating. It is, to me, it's everywhere in society now. And I think to the very beginning stages of AI was, the very first word processing when it would do spell check for you. I mean, that was the very first AI. And so now we're to the point where we are now. So is AI in law enforcement? Well, of course, because we have to use spell check. But sometimes we still don't get it right. So yes, it is there. I think it does have to be managed correctly, and that's something that every facet of society, politically and everywhere, we're having to face, because it's our rate of expansion of AI is so fast, and how do you keep up with that? But I do think that we'll see more of that in law enforcement. I do think, like I said before, we need things to be force multipliers and not force eliminators. We have to have that human element in there, but we need to be able to use technology and AI to multiply that. On the flip side of that, though, I do think that there's, we've had a couple of occurrences in High Point where people have sent us what are very clearly manipulated or AI-generated phone calls and videos, that were allegations against people in the community or allegations against officers, and that takes a lot of manpower and a lot of legwork to verify that. Is this a deep fake? Is this something that somebody generated to cause angst, or is this real? And so it is helpful to us, but it can also be extremely detrimental, across every facet.
Thank you.
Could I add a little bit more?
Yes, please.
Absolutely, we see the same thing with victims creating things to accuse people. As recently as 2 weeks ago, alleging a sexual assault using AI-generated information, and as you can imagine, that takes a lot of time to investigate, and then it also creates a lot of problems for people that get accused falsely. That's a scenario where we're able to figure that out in the investigative process, goes back to what Manny said about human verification of these things. There's really a few other things that I think are worth mentioning. One is all of the agencies are capturing thousands of hours of video. It's not just body-worn camera, it's surveillance video. It's private businesses who know that they want to contribute to public safety by providing access to their cameras. When the agencies ingest that, we got to figure out a way to try to look through that footage without it requiring one person to sit down at a computer and look at 100 hours of video. So that's a big place where AI can come in. If you can search for black Honda Accord, front right quarter panel damage, because that's what your victims have seen, or you have an image from somewhere else, that can shortcut an investigation down to somebody that you need to go talk to. That doesn't mean it's the vehicle, but it does mean that you've got a really good quality lead. In Burlington, that led to the arrest of somebody who shot a man in the head driving down the interstate. Total strangers, had no idea who it was. The other situations that are coming our way and already exist in the community are things about facial recognition and the application of that technology. We know that facial recognition is not flawless, and we shouldn't think that it will make so if the computer says it's this person that the officers are going to go arrest him and take him to the jail. They got to investigate, but they should at least know they should go look at that person. For example, my 2 cents on this, and this comes from talking to the community about this technology specifically and getting their opinion about these things. If someone is a shooter, if someone has raped someone, if they've committed a sexual offense against a child, do we want the police to have an idea about where that person might be from some facial recognition? I think that universally we all think the answer is yes. The police need to go where that person might be. It might be them, it might not be, but we need to go figure out if that's them or not. Because if they've committed a crime like that, there's probable cause to arrest them. A judicial official has issued a warrant. The police need to go figure out if that's the person, and if it's them, take them into custody. Right? That's how public safety improves, and it certainly makes the use of the technology make the staff faster about getting the things done that the community wants.
Thank you. So we've got time for one more question, and we're just going to start with Chief Balick, put you on the spot again, and go all the way down. If you had a genie in the bottle wish, granted one wish that would make your job easier or be able to serve the public better, what would that be?
I think it's interesting because, the biggest contribution that the community is, kind of another component of that. So I'm going to tag along a little bit to what Chief Thompson said earlier. The folks that get involved in the criminal justice system, generally on the whole, they come from places without parental oversight and guidance where they start making those bad decisions early. If you steal a bike, you're really close. That's the first time usually that the police will come in contact with somebody who 2 years later is armed with a firearm and has been shooting somebody. If you can employ the right school structures, properly funded schools, right, that have sufficient after-school programs and athletic programs, right, those seem to be pretty effective for the vast majority of us who grew up in effective systems about helping people stay out of trouble. There's other places, right, where folks deviate, right, the use of drugs, those sorts of things. We have to stay focused on those things. I think the genie in the bottle thing, maybe for me, is the idea that it has to be a comprehensive evaluation of what the problem is, and then we have to, as communities, be collectively focused about dealing with those in an intentional way and not getting distracted. There's always going to be something new. There's always going to be another interest, right? But it really does come down to like what the baseline services are that communities are supposed to offer, and they're baseline services because they're important and they work.
Thank you, Chief Balick.
I'm going to keep this, I guess, really as basic as I can. Not trying to go so much for the genie in the bottle, but what can we as cogs in this wheel, right, that we call community, how do we make this happen? Oftentimes, I think from our positions that we have seen many times where we have a plethora of non-for-profits, entities that provide services to certain populations, and all those individuals are all fighting for the same resources. There's a very limited amount of resources that we have in municipal government, and if we all work collectively and maybe put our heads together and not fought about for the same fund funds, or we're more strategic about deploying the services that each entity provides, whether it's unhoused, whether it's for juveniles, whether it's for, you name it, plug it in. There's competing interests in all these little random buckets. If we put our heads together and work together, I think that we would be in a much, much better place.
Thank you.
I'll go back with Chief Baylog. I think one area of focus that if I could have one wish to have a significant impact in our community, it'd be around mental health. We have seen that really just impact all facets of our community. And unfortunately, folks that struggle with mental health on whatever level oftentimes interact with law enforcement, whether it's substance use, whether it's our unhoused community, whether it's parents struggling, whether it's children struggling, whatever it is, figuring out a better system to help our community address its mental health needs. And that really hit home for me when about 5 years ago we started our behavioral health response team. So we have crisis counselors. They're actually not police employees, but they're city employees, and they ride in the car with police officers to calls where there is a mental health component. And so they'll show up on the call. If there isn't any immediate safety concerns, no weapons, no violence, sometimes the officer may never get out of the car, and they let the crisis counselor go and interact and find out what's going on and see what would be the most appropriate resource to help address that individual. And when we started this program up, we have about 7 or 8 of those partnerships, those teams that go out. They're answering thousands of calls a year. And we could probably triple the size of the team and still not have enough to go out and address these needs. So, and again, it's across all areas of our community. It doesn't just impact the youth. It doesn't just impact the unhoused. It's substance use. There's a lot of issues. So I think for me, it would be focused in around how we better help our community address mental health issues.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, I think the mental health crisis as well. Everybody, it seems to come up everywhere. That we do have, there's a mental health issue, okay, and that those and how to deal with that and the proliferation of it, and what those problems lead to. Just like Chief Thompson said, those things tend to lead to becoming unhoused, and it a lot of times we find people that are committing other crimes or that are petty crimes. There is a mental health component to that as well. And what instead of I hear lots of good ideas, but it's really putting those things into action and having something that's sustainable and that works across the board that seems to be eluding everybody. Because I don't think there's one answer that's going to solve every person's crisis that's having a mental health issue. But it needs to be somewhat more centralized, because there's so many hands, there's so many people that want to be involved with that, and sometimes we're just working against each other to get to the end.
Thank you. We've got time for a couple of questions from the audience, but first, let's give the panelists a round of applause. Okay, Kelly Marks.
So I don't know. I know they've passed it, I believe, unless I haven't gotten an update. It still has not been overwritten with a veto. So I think it's a horrible idea. Just a horrible idea. We had a violence panel, gun violence panel. I could have a investigative support division. They're officers that go out and they're just focused on gun crime. I could send one of them out into the community, and 20 minutes later they'll come back with a gun. That simple. The proliferation of guns in our community is absolutely insane. And the problem that poses is then you don't control who gets their hands on those firearms and what they're doing with them. And unfortunately, what we've seen, even though Winston-Salem talked about their youth violence issue, we had an assessment done for Greensboro, and what they came in and said is, hey, you guys don't have a youth violence program. All of our shooters are 18 to 24 years old. Well, that's not the first time they've picked up a gun and decided to shoot it. It started when they were youth, and for whatever reason in our community, they're really on the radar, 18 to 24 years old. But we average 1,500 to 2,000 guns a year that we take off the street, and we lose 400 to 500 a year stolen from cars that people leave in their vehicles unlocked, and firearms are being stolen. So, I think it's funny. We're required as law enforcement officers, we have to qualify on our firearms every single year. And BLET, Basic Law Enforcement Training, there's a 40-hour class that we have to take to know when we're allowed to shoot, proficiency, and we have to qualify every year and meet a certain level of proficiency for us to keep our job. And not politics, but to me it's like what the legislator wants to do is say, if you're 18, you can go buy a gun, have absolutely no training whatsoever, carry it with you pretty much wherever you want to. And I just don't understand that thought process. So.
So it's like everything else, right? We get a bunch of kids together. Sometimes those aren't necessarily juveniles, they're 18 or older. The main problems that we see is that they start taking over streets and intersections and those type of things. So that's definitely a crime. The other portion of that is they're driving very recklessly. So when you're driving recklessly, you're not only endangering yourself and the party that you're with, but you're endangering the motoring public in general. So we're real concerned about that. We've made a concerted effort in Winston-Salem to try to address every time we have those type of crimes, but it's also a very difficult thing to address because you're talking about motorsports bikes, you're talking about four-wheelers that are essentially all-terrain vehicles. A police officer gets behind them and then they go into the woods or into areas that our police cars can't necessarily navigate, short of having a helicopter, maybe drones, but you're talking a very complex operation. We are seizing these vehicles. We're doing everything that we can to stop it. So to answer your question, yes, there are other crimes that are being committed other than just some minor traffic laws. So we have not seen them doing them during that cycle of where they're committing those motor vehicle laws. Some of these folks that are involved in that type of behavior do have a criminal history involving some of those actions.
Okay, we've got time for one more. I saw Tim's hand.
Yes, it definitely happens here, and in some places it happens at scale. I represent the smallest law enforcement agency in front of you, community of 63,000 people. We've had really significant human trafficking organizations, both around labor and sex. It's really the equivalent of slavery for sex in the vast majority of those situations. Oftentimes it's both physical control, punching somebody in the head to make them do things, or consistently having them be addicted to a drug that is very, very physically addictive, like fentanyl, primarily. And then once it goes into that space of human trafficking, there's almost every manner of crime associated with that activity that you can think of also. So yes is the answer. It's primarily in those two spaces. In North Carolina, the laws around human trafficking, you do have to have some witness statements around these things. It is difficult to convict people, but when they do get convicted, they get gigantic sentences, as they should.
All right. I'm sorry we're out of time, but thank you all for coming here today. I want to personally thank each person here with us today. So I'd like to thank Assistant Chief Abernathy with High Point, Chief Thompson, Assistant Chief Gomez of Winston-Salem, and Chief Balick of Burlington. My father-in-law was Stan Dixon, and he retired from the Greensboro Police Department. So I am intimately aware of the service that you provide to our community and the time away from your families. One of my favorite quotes is from Dr. Seuss, and it's from the Lorax, if you're familiar. And it says, "Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not." And that's the truth. So thank you. And I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you very much, Tammy, and let's hear it again one more time for our officers here. Stepping in. All right, just a couple announcements here. Carolina Core Housing Study information is available now on the GRRA website, so check that out. And then also make sure, if you check your emails, respond to the call for action to prevent a 68.3% increase in insurance rates. I know that was regarding the dwelling policies. So see your GRRA-RCA or NC Realtors emails for how to contact Insurance Commissioner Mike Causey. And that's all we have for now. So thank you for coming out, and we look forward to seeing you next time.